I'd just like to welcome everyone to this artist talk. We're on the Bundjalung Nation, and the gallery is situated in the area of the Widjabul Waiabul people, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present and future. I'd like to welcome Charlotte Haywood to talk to us all this morning about an exhibition with her partner Edward Horn that's currently at the gallery. So I hope some of you may have already seen the show, but for those who haven't, we'll tell you all about it. Welcome, Charlotte.
Thanks, Fiona. Hello, everybody.
So the gallery, I'd just like to sort of set the scene for those who may not have seen the show. It's actually an interesting show in that it's an exhibition in what I think of as two parts. So Ed Horn's work is a large-scale installation, like a playground installation in the quadrangle, and entitled Balancing Act. And then Charlotte, her work is in Gallery 3 upstairs, so that's the other half of the exhibition. And Charlotte has invited a number of other artists to participate in the show. The exhibition is called Mnemonic Vegetables. Charlotte, can you tell us a little bit about what that means?
Yes, I can. So yeah, mnemonic is a word that means encoded knowledge, and it's usually found in, they say, within a device. Sorry, a device that has encoded knowledge. So this has been found throughout time, you know, from the beginning of history, really. And you find it a lot in Indigenous cultures through songlines and totems. Even Stonehenge, they say now, is like a mnemonic device, sort of a place of memory where memory is encoded. And usually these things have been to do with our relationships to nature and survival and that sort of harmonious reciprocal relationship. But we also find mnemonics in science and acronyms, but to expand on that, for me, I think it means embodied knowledge. So it's the knowledge that is inherently within us, within nature, within plants. And vegetables is, yeah, alluding to the plant kingdom. So I just thought it had a good ring to it, mnemonic vegetables.
Indeed, it sure does. And I like that it's sort of, it's open to interpretation, because I think that the work is so layered. You and Ed have been working on these ideas, I think, for some time, and there's so much layering of knowledge and input from around the world, from different cultures. So I understand that you've done a number of residencies leading up to this year. I know that Ed went to Peru to a residency called Goktalab, and I must say, in the lead up to this talk, I went online and had a look at their residencies, and I don't think I've ever seen any residency location quite so spectacular. Unfortunately, Ed's not able to join the talk this morning, but Charlotte, you have also taken some residencies. There was the Tropical Indigenous Ethnobotany Centre in Cairns. Can you tell us a little bit about your residencies?
Yes, I will. Well, in fact, I'll rewind just to Goktalab, because Ed and I were there with our family. And that's a really remote part of Peru. It's in the Andes, but it's in the Amazonas. So you've got this great intersection of Amazon and Andean altitude. So spectacular scenery and orchids and hummingbirds and due to the remote location of this village, which had only had a car road put in 8 years before, the landscape and obviously, yeah, the flora and fauna was just spectacular. And so we were able to just immerse ourselves in that sort of grandeur of the Andes and those species, while being at GOTSA Lab, which is an interdisciplinary lab. So they use a lot of permaculture and regenerative agricultural practices, but also work in ceramics and food, sculpture, adobe style architecture. So we were there, which was incredible. And then, yes, I went up to the Tropical Indigenous Ethnobotany Centre at the Australian Tropical Herbarium at James Cook University and spent time with senior elder and Imbabram man, Jerry Turpin, who's Australia's leading Indigenous ethnobotanist. And he runs the centre there to maintain, well, he got to do with botanical species and ethno, meaning sort of ancient culture. And so his job there is really to maintain that knowledge and make sure that the ownership and the uses of those plants maintain into the countries or the clans' ownership. So yeah, I went out with him out onto his country, up to the African tablelands, where he's sort of reinvigorating species that are slowly dying out, including the purple wattle, which I'd never seen before, which is an Imbabram plant. But just, you know, it was an honour to be with him because his knowledge spans, you know, multiple clan groups and countries, as well as, you know, existing in, you know, a Western sort of scientific environment. So he's this incredible man who sort of bridges the gap between two worlds in plant knowledge.
And so you've invited a lot of artists into the show. Unfortunately, due to COVID and border closures, a couple of the artists from Brisbane weren't able to be included in the way that you had planned. I know you had invited a fruit and vegetable carving artist into the show, which would have been so much fun. But difficult to get the work here across the border now. But you have been working with an Ikebana master. Can you tell it?
Yeah, I just dropped out at the end, but I think you said to talk a little bit about the Ikebana master. Oh, my reception is bad, so I didn't pick that up, but I will talk about that. So yeah, yeah, I've been working with, in a sort of student teacher relationship with Keiko Clerk, who is a Sogetsu Ikebana master. And because we had to adapt this work for the show because of the border closures, I thought it'd be interesting to do an evolving Ikebana work that evolved throughout the exhibition, and it is sort of synonymous with that student-teacher relationship, and that relationship is also, I believe, evident in our relationship with nature. You know, nature is one of the greatest teachers for all different reasons, and so yeah, we do these Skype sessions every couple of weeks, and really she's there, you know, teaching me and sort of opening up a new way of looking at plants and aesthetics, of course. So yeah, that's been great. But I have also obviously been working with other artists, plant practitioners, including Helle Jorgensen. And again, in working with other artists in the show, it's really about those relationships that are fostered and nurtured, and the knowledge that's shared to do with plants, because you just find people have all these sort of idiosyncratic nuances of nature that they've observed or seen or learnt. And so I really wanted that multifaceted, multi-platform, multi-narrational view of nature. So yeah, I've also been with Helle Jorgensen. She works a lot with banana fibres. So she was showing me how to harvest and turn the petiole, the like trunk of the banana, into fibre, and she's done some incredible work for the show, incredibly meticulous. And then also local Bunjalung weaver Kylie Caldwell, who works a lot with bucky rush, bungalow palm, pandanus. We were out collecting bucky rush and, you know, just generally hanging out together and being in those spaces of nature where you can share and sort of cultivate good intentions. And of course, there's a whole video work that looks at, it's called The Wayfinders, when we've lost our way, either emotionally or spiritually or environmentally. And there it was working with 4 female vocalists. So the exhibition itself sort of taps into various senses, and it is about creating that space of reverence, a shared space of reverence. So through, yeah, the vocals and the plant practices and processes, we're hoping that's the feeling you get.
Well, I would say the exhibition in your space is very beautiful. I've heard a number of visitors to the gallery come and say how beautiful the exhibition is, and it does have a very, I think, female, gentle sort of aesthetic. You know, your work and some of the other artists' works, you detailed, intricate weavings using natural and or local fibres, and there's a lot of flowers and fruit and vegetables and sprouting coconuts and different things, and I think it's got quite a feminine aesthetic, which is perhaps the opposite end of the spectrum to work outside, which is, and you can tell us a little bit about that in a second, but it's I think it could be the largest single artwork that the gallery has ever shown, too big to be inside the gallery. It's for those who have come anywhere near the gallery in the last couple of weeks, you definitely have seen it outside in the quadrangle. That create 4 balancing beams. So anyhow, Charlotte, can you tell us, in Ed's absence, can you tell us a little bit how Ed works and anything about this?
Yeah, yeah, I can. So, yeah, Ed and I often work together, and we've been working together for the last 10 years in collaboration, or work alongside each other. And Ed does work in large scale. You know, his scale and the materials he's working in are very robust, or even at times we've coined ourselves like hard and soft, or, you know, there is that very much that yin yang relationship that may be seen quite traditionally, but we're actually both very comfortable in those roles. So yeah, in him creating that large work, he loves that idea of sort of manipulating space or diverting space, or the way people interact with spaces. So originally that piece was meant to be 4 seesaws, but due to constraints, you know, in the human world and in council, and that was not possible. And so it evolved into a work that is now fixed, and it's called The Balancing Act. And it really is about our relationship with the living planet, being at tipping points. And with the seesaws being fixed, there's no give and take. So it's that idea of how do we get back to that reciprocal relationship with nature? How do we wayfind our way back? And so that large work actually, again, represents the cardinal points of navigation, north, south, east, west, which is a metaphor for finding our way in the environment, you know, or psychologically, which relates to the video work that I did with the 4 vocalists in the gallery. Yeah. Well, that's what I was also going to say about the work, is that it also, all the timbers within that work have been reclaimed there from fire mitigation. So it's really looking at where we're at right now in Australia, in California, and you know, how do we get back to a place of harmony? And so yeah, those trees were cut down for fire mitigation, and you know, they're beautiful examples of blackbud and scribbly gum and bloodwood, and yeah, so it's like, it's got that work for me has got a lot of you know, it's contentious, and it feels like there's that tension there. There's that work's really showing that tension between the, you know, human nature, human plant relationship. So and even the way that people engage in that work and are able to play around on it and balance it and not tip over, it really is sort of emulating that metaphor of our relationship.
Mm. And it's sort of, you know, it's so topical that, you know, that you've had to actually come, well, you've come across those, or Ed's come across that material for fire mitigation on property. So I love the fact that you're able to, you know, do those 2 things in the one action. And I understand that there's plans for reusing the wood into future artworks as well. So that's wonderful. I must say it's proving to be one of the most popular installations outside. Every day there are children and families having their lunch on it and running up and down and jumping off it, and so it's really lovely to see the quadrangle activated in that way. Now, actually, in the process of developing the show, you had a very long list of public programs ideas to accompany the show, because I know that the exhibition is, you know, one of the core ingredients is this collaboration and involvement with other artists. And so the public programs reflected that, in that it was a way of involving everyone in the community into that collaborative process. Unfortunately, due to COVID, a lot of those things have had to fall by the wayside. I know there were, you know, public choir events and a feast, and they would have been so wonderful. But and I think that if I understand it correctly, that Ed's piece outside was to form, in a way, like an arena space for some of those public events. So we've had to whittle down the public program somewhat, but there are still some events coming up, and the details will be available soon through our website and also on Facebook. So I understand that Kylie Caldwell, one of the artists in your show, will be soon giving a weaving workshop. And there will be a dance event inside the balancing act coming soon. Banana fighters. So all of those details will be available soon. We're just pinning all those things down. And also, I think for people who are on Facebook, there's images of your each one of your Ikebana projects that you're doing with Chico. You know, there's every second week, I think, there's a new one coming through. So you can come and see them in person, or you can see the progress. Charlotte's learning the Ikebana skills from the master through our Facebook page. Yeah, is there anything you want to say about the public programs?
Well, I could talk about, yeah, in sort of pointing to the public programs, because most of those programs are by collaborating artists, although I'll be there to assist them. But in the exhibition itself, you know, is not greater than the sum, or the works are not greater than the sum of the process. And that's what this whole exhibition has really been about, is those relationships and creating or invoking that space of vulnerability for myself and any of the collaborating artists. So it has been about, yeah, creating those spaces of reverence, vulnerability, to really explore and experiment together. And so even though we've created these works or these forms, they're not what really I find have brought the joy, or, you know, I've felt more enlightened, I suppose, by the processes and those relationships in all of those works. And so it's so interesting when the end result, the outcome is not, for me, what this exhibition is even really at its heart. But, you know, you have to have some kind of symbolic end result for people to understand, you know, there has been this journey. And that's what, yeah, you'll see in a number of my wall works, there'll be plant materials that, you know, I've learned about or collected or processed with other artists. And so, yeah, it has been this really interesting for me, experimental, yeah, vulnerable space. And again, like you said, it's very female, so there's a lot of trust involved. And with those public programs, again, it's a lot of those artists who have collaborated or put in their own works as well, and who will be running those workshops, which, you know, it's that thing sort of extending the exhibition, like most public programs, beyond just the art and the artists, but to the public, and sort of the democratizing of art within and out of the gallery. So that's really exciting.
Yeah. I find, I guess, as a curator, I find one of the sort of more interesting aspects, and this is, you know, from the role of a curator, one of the is that one, you're the artist and you're making work, you know, the majority of the work in your space is your work, but two, you're also curating the work in a way, because you're inviting other artists to contribute work that becomes part of your work. And then there's the collaboration aspect as well. So I find that a really interesting model that you're using, where your role is, you know, all of these things as artist, curator and collaborator, all to create the work for the show, for the one show. We're seeing some images on the screen here of some of your wall pieces. So you can see, this is all of Charlotte's work that we're seeing right at the moment, and involves, you know, an assortment of natural fibres woven into wooden pieces, which I feel that pieces on the wall, perhaps from your South American residencies, but that's my interpretation of your work. Can you, yes, in particular, this piece here really reminds me of a South American sort of bird figure. Is that intended, or what? How do you come up with the imagery for the work?
Yeah, no, when I look at it now and you mention that, I do almost see the Nazca lines in Peru, which are the giant sort of land cuttings you can see from high above the, from very high up, basically in a plain, that have been there for millennia. Well, this work, having said that, I mean, all the works that I make come from a stream of consciousness. Again, it's just like about preparing that space to draw or to create or to weave or to collaborate, and then it's sort of, you basically intuitively moving, as it were, or channeling some other greater force. But this piece in itself is most of my pieces sort of have, again, multi layers, but it's got the cotyledon, which are like the seed leaf of seedlings, is sort of the main central focus there. But to the side of that is this incredible, this work is called The Shapeshifters, and I did obviously a lot of research and came across the species, which is Proquilla trifoliolata, which was a rainforest vine from Chile and Argentina that could actually see, in inverted commas. So it could change its leaves, the size and shape and color and orientation and even the vein pattern to mimic the host it was present on. And I mean, that is just, it's incredible. It's like this mimicry. And then I did further research, closer to home, and found that there was an Australian species that had been found not too long ago in the North Kimberley. Now I'm just forgetting, just up in the north, in Catherine Gorge, and by a scientist who works at the Royal Botanical Gardens. And again, it's got similar properties of biomimicry. So yeah, that idea of shape-shifting, I suppose, is very Amazonian, or in inverted commas, shamanic. Not that I meant for it to really allude to that, because I'm really looking at nature's incredible properties and the senses that they're now discovering in Western science are present within a lot of plant species in the plant kingdom. So yeah, I mean, I think I just want to say one thing, going back to that idea of, artist, curator, collaborator, and also within this body of work, I'm also the student. So it's got this idea of the cyclical nature of everything and life. And so, again, that's sort of emblematic of the whole exhibition, of the plant kingdom, of that, that swapping of energy, or the swapping of roles, of that sort of more network, or the fabric of existence, I suppose, how we live, rather than that very singular dominant role as human or artist, spreading the seeds around, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, I love the fact that you have such a scientific approach. There's a lot of research and a personal fascination into the scientific side, but also into the social aspects, the historical aspects, the spiritual aspects, and I feel that perhaps your work is sort of intuitively bringing all of those aspects together without, you know, it's not a scientific show, but it, you know, all of that knowledge, all of the knowledge that you're accumulating is feeding into the work. So what's on the cards next? Where does the Charlotte Haywood and Edward Horn show go next?
I know. Well, hopefully just into the garden. Yeah, hopefully. I mean, obviously we'll be present at the public programs and workshops and performances. You know, Minnie Narigali's performing in the Balancing Act and Hella Jorgensen and Carly Caldwell's workshops, as well as hopefully a plant, seedling and knowledge swap, which is still to be confirmed, you know, COVID pending. And then, yeah, we'll be getting into the garden to you know, continue our permaculture practices, but also next year carrying on the themes. I suppose, you know, in a way I'll call it cultural botany, because it's historical, it's scientific, it's you know, traditional ecological knowledge systems, multicultural knowledge. We'll be going to Botanica at Brisbane, the City Botanical Gardens in May. But just further exploring, yeah, these relationships that have...
Charlotte, you were just breaking up there. Where did you say you were going to? What, Botanic Gardens?
Oh, to Brisbane City Botanic Gardens. Yep. So we'll be going there. But just to continue exploring, yeah, that sort of space of vulnerability, those relationships of reciprocity, yeah, see where we end up. Well,
I feel that it's an ongoing, perhaps lifelong love of this area. You know, this field of experts in all of this knowledge, and you're harvesting, you're learning from other experts as well, and sharing knowledge.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah, it's like that synthesizing.
I love that it's a very sort of, it's like a building up of a community of knowledge and knowledge experiences.
That's exactly it. It feels, yeah, it's like a tapestry of, you know, of ideas and, you know, seeded relationships, you know, becoming communities and networks, and that idea of supporting each other. And I think gives a lot more joy to your practice, rather than having a very solo, for me anyway, personally, the solo artist career. As much as I love being by myself, you know, once you get to those places of experimentation and vulnerability, you know something exciting is happening. So yeah.
Perhaps we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything you want to add that we haven't covered?
No, I feel like we've covered quite a bit in a short amount of time. I mean, there's lots to talk about, but, you know, we could do days of talking. So I feel like that's a good little concise, you know, minute.
Excellent. Great. That's great.
Hi, Fiona and Charlotte. It's Claudie here.
Soon. Yep. Yes, this is Claudie. She's doing technical assistance. Doing the tech.
There's a few people who wanted to ask questions. So Aviva Reid had a question. So I might unmute Aviva and see if is that okay with you, Charlotte, if people ask a few questions?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Aviva, I'm just going to unmute you now.
Oh, hello. Congratulations.
Hi, Aviva.
Hi, beautiful work. It's pretty exciting to be able to see it over this digital platform, actually, because I'm speaking from Wurundjeri lands in Melbourne.
Oh, thanks for checking it out.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm very inspired.
Yeah.
I'm so curious about that work. It was sort of, I think, the last one that you came up. Well, I'm curious about all of them, but I thought it was a good one to speak to because there looked like lots of different plants and fibres in it. And I think you answered the question. I was really curious what the horsetail plant was.
Yeah, which is the agave, which is like the large agaves, and I can't remember the Latin name right now, but it's incredible. They process the leaves, which are like 2 meters long or something, and they actually, in part of the processing with any kind of fiber, you usually card it, but they actually card it on the big barrel cactuses. If you've got the big spikes, and that will create all the different fibers or separate them. So I love that fact that part of the process is actually using the cacti to process the fiber.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, but then there was also banana fiber in there, and banana silk, and the bucky rush that I collected with Kylie Caldwell out on Bundjalung country where we are now. And I think there was some juice. Oh, and corn husk. So that work is called the homemakers. So sort of alluding to all those plant materials that we use to, and of course that lovely gourd, to make our homes, forever. Once upon a time, forever.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks, Aviva. Yay. Well, thanks for coming and listening, everybody. I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, Charlotte. And thanks everyone for joining us this morning. It's been a great pleasure working with Ed and Charlotte on this show. And
thank you. See you later.
Thanks everybody for joining us today, and come in and check out the exhibition. Thanks, Fiona. Thanks, Charlotte.